Okay, so in this video, as a Power Platform developer, leveraging what you know already to bridge the gap and start jumping in and building AI solutions, AI business applications, AI agents. I'm calling it the Power Agent because what they are, they're agents that we build using Microsoft 365 AI that's hosted in Azure AI Foundry, not just Open AI. It could be Grok, it could be DeepSync, it could be all of the thousands that are on Hugging Face. But we fuse it together. So you got M365, you got Azure AI, and then what's in the middle, the secret sauce where you and I really starts to shine is our skill set on the Power Platform. So it's a Power Platform. So to be able to bridge this gap, there's 5 skills that you absolutely have to master and have to know almost like the back of your hand. And to do it, you have to be a SOAJA. So you have to be a SOAJA if I tap into my Southern roots. So you have to be a soldier. And really what this is an acronym of the 5 skills that you should master. So let's talk about the problem statement, and then we'll break these skills down and see how they map into this solution. So the first one is, the problem that we're running is that these are contracts within the enterprise, right? Contracts like standard contracts. So SOWs and service agreements or non-disclosure agreements, lease agreements for cars, lease agreements for offices, whatever the case may be. So these are general contracts. And as an organization, there's an obligation with the legal team, the contracting team, the regulatory team to stay on top of these contracts. As they engage, they want to make sure that the right clauses are in place to cover the organization, to make sure that the terms are agreeable for how they do business and what makes sense for them financially and that backs into their financial strategy. So these are some of the key ones, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but there's 3.1 million spend on legal for average size company. These are companies of about 500 employees or more, and that's going to be on the low end. So you can see that this spend, the larger the company, the more contracts or the more legal services that you require, this can creep up. 90% of the executives, even with that level of spend that's relative to their org size and contract activity, 90% agree that the contracts need to be better. And this better could be many different scenarios, right? It could be better as in faster turnaround time, better as in the right clauses for their business, better as in can we get this thing shorter so everyone can understand what's in the contract and not have a legal advisor explain all the bits and pieces in there. How can you read the contract and make sure that your best interests are accounted for, to make sure that you're not liable for something that you're not signing up for, that you're unaware of, right? So 90% of these can be better. The 21 million that gets leaked out from software application, software as a service of apps or services is really dealing with the licensing related to that SaaS platform, right? So when you sign these contracts, Microsoft does it a little bit easier because they go year by year, but there's like an annual agreement. There's an enterprise agreement, right? And from there, you're going to earmark that says, okay, we're going to have this much Azure spend. We're going to have these many licenses. We're going to have this X, Y, Z. And you go with that number that you know you can hit, because what Microsoft is do, they're going to discount it based on that volume. And if you don't hit that, then you have to shore up. If you go over that, then you have to shore up, right? So there's a leak in that process. And one of the pieces that is a leak is that whatever your license agreement was prior, some of those automatically renew, and not getting in front of that renewal date is a problem. So having these contracts in your environment that you're contractually under obligation to serve and to fulfill, some of those are going to auto renew on you. So the agreement that you had 3 years ago, and here we go, that contract is set to auto renew next week. A lot of executives could be blindsided by that. And usually those who are involved with it are probably using the software on the day-to-day, may be aware because they're looking to upgrade, they're looking to get more features and functionality out of it. But there's time and time again where there's this relationship, this agreement, this ERP that gets rolled in. There's software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service gets rolled in. The people who were key and part of that decision-making process have moved on to other departments, moved on to other parts of the organization, moved on out of the organization, right? So there's this gap of unawareness, and there's no system or process governing this. And that's how you have a $20 million leak annually in that scenario. And then you got breach of contracts. Then you got contracts are hard to find. But anyway, so this is the business scenario for contracts. And we're looking at how can we make AI manage this better. A lot of us are managing this today without AI, but that's only because we're not doing a good job at it. That's only because we don't have a lot of contracts that we have to stay on top of. That's only because we came comfortable with and face the fact of the matter is we can't stay on top of everything. So let's keep tracking the pulse on the big stuff that could have a tremendous financial responsibility, but some of the little things that is not worth our time because we're already 110% consumed, we're just going to ride with those losses, almost like a loss mitigation strategy, right? So with AI, we don't have to accept those losses. With AI, if it's 600 contracts or 600,000 contracts, we can put processes and systems in place to manage these more effectively. So let's talk about where the gaps are, and then we go back to how we need to be SOAJA to manage this. So here's the library. The problem is that these contracts, if you just look at them from their naming convention, may or may not make sense, right? But sometimes we cannot account or depend on the name by itself. We really need to crack open these contracts, read inside of the contract, understand the clauses in the contract, and then pull out metadata that's relevant to our organization and or department. So when you look at this contract, if I scroll to the right, we've implemented a power contracting agent that will, one, read the contract, and based on the prompt that we have for our risk level, we'll give it a level of low, medium, high, or critical. So anything and it would rank that. And then in this column here, where you have the risk column, it gives a justification of why it gave it that medium rank risk score. Not only does it give you a risk analysis on the contract, it also gives you the contract type. Now here, we have to be careful. So we work with the business because one of the things we did not want was that even though this tag is extremely helpful because now we can group by master service agreements, we can group by car leases, we can group by and quickly identify all of our office leases, so on and so forth. But we wanted that to be a finite number because what we did not want was many different ways to call an office lease an office lease, right? And then have these scattered across. And then it'd be like herding cats who trying to get our arms around all the office leases. So what we did, we gave the AI agent responsible for identifying the contracting type, a finite list of options. The same is true for the contract start date. We defined what a contract start date meant and a contract end date. And we also gave it the special date. If you can't determine, or if it's undetermined, or you don't have a high confidence score to feel like you have the right end date, then give it this generic 1/1900. That means there's no end date and it's undetermined. And now, because you and I, we're soldiers, we know how to build workflows to quickly identify these 1900 dates and then put a human in the loop by having someone review them and take a second look at these. And doing that in Power Automate in the Power Platform is very trivial, as you and I know. The termination period, the signing party. Ignore this. When I was writing this insert, this was an update. When I was writing the update, I was grabbing the wrong output of the agent. So ignore these. These columns are misleading. This party name should have been this one here. But notice what we're doing here. This is another skill set when I talk about being a soldier that you need to know. Because notice how I'm using JSON to represent the party names. Now, this is where you have to be very creative in the ability to think outside of the box, SOAJA, right? So here, what the problem statement is, okay, these payments, these signing parties or signatories, they can go, they're vast. They can be all over the place. We have contracts where we need 4 signatures on the receiving end and 4 signatures on the on the A side of the contract, and 4 on the B side of the contract. We have scenarios where we need one sign on the contract on the A side, but for the B party, they may require, because of how they operate an agreement set up on their LLC, at least 3 members to sign off on it. So now in that scenario, I got 1 on the A side, I got 3 on the B side, and I can fluctuate for that. Here's another scenario we have with party signatories. Some contracts require the name, the signature, the date it was signed, and the title of the organization. Some contracts you can just get away with the name and the signature. Some of them you have to have the signature and just a date, right? So they could vary on what all encompass that signature line for both the A side and the B side. So to accommodate that and not to blow up our list schema, we had to get creative. We had to think outside of the box, SOAJA, and look at how can we get creative, not blow up our schema. When I say blow up our schema, that you're accommodating for signing party A, first name, last name, signature date, and then maybe an image of the signature and all this other good stuff. And then you're adding all these columns, single line text columns and all this other good stuff. And then you have another contract in the same library that requires more than that. And now your naming conventions and your columns are all over the place. Here, we can store it, have the AI read these contracts, create the right JSON schema real time for that contract type, store it in JSON. We adhere to on what that schema is going to be, right? So we know so it's going to be an array, as you can see here. For those who are familiar, for those who are SOAJAs and they know how to read this, right? It's going to be an array, a JSON array. Sorry, I can't really zoom in that tight. And then the properties, right? So we agreed to the objects in that array, what the property values are going to be, and as well as give them flexibility to add additional property values that they need based on the different contract types. This is what the AI is going to do. The AI is smart enough to do it, and it's going to do it real time. The contract summary, look what we're doing here. Again, thinking outside of the box, out of the box thinking, being a SOAJA. This is where we're returning HTML. We love HTML, especially when dealing with AI architecture or solutions, because HTML gives the AI a lot of flexibility on how to format that document in real time to be consumable. So when I say format that document in real time, format those results, is that maybe this executive summary for lease agreements, we want that to be laid out in a certain way, right? In the header, we need to know the contract start date, the name of the vehicle, the make of the vehicle, the model of the vehicle, the year of the vehicle, the number of miles on it when we purchased it, XYZ, right? So those may have a certain structure that they must adhere to. And then there's the executive summary, and then there's the term and conditions. So all of our car leases, we want those to be formatted the exact same way for that contract type. For office, it could be a different format, right? For master service agreements, it could be a different format. I'm talking about the format of the contract. I'm referring to the format of the executive summary of that contract type. See, so we got to give the AI enough flexibility to produce these different layouts. We want to have consistency. We want to drive it towards consistency. So the best engine or tool for that is going to be HTML. And notice what we're doing. This HTML, we want to be very clear, very crisp, and you will see that in the prompt, that is not to give us the open HTML tag, the header tag, and the body tag. We don't need an HTML document. We really just need that div tag, that main div tag under the body tag, and everything in between. That's where we want to start, and we kind of lock it in there, right? So here, we got raw text, and in our raw text, this is going to be our OCR, right? This is going to be our character recognition. Basically, and you will see the flow with this, we're going to pass it a stringified version of the blob, and we're going to run it through Document Intelligence Services. We may be upgrading this to Mistral because we just got the announcement that Mistral is now have their latest version in Azure AI Foundry, and they're actually known, they're one of the best of breeds, probably in the Gartner. I haven't seen the Gartner report to see if they're upper to the top right, but this gives us a flexibility that, one, let's take that blob, extract out the text because we need plain text, And this raw text, even though it's further down the metadata on this column, this plain text is actually feeders or inputs for each one of these agents that will hydrate these metadata columns per contract. Now, here's the rub. We know Power Platform. So and remember how I said, it don't matter if it's 6 documents, 60 documents, 600, 6,000, 600,000, we can build a solution that can handle that. The number of data elements is irrelevant, especially when you start to automate, right? And that's where the power of AI solutions on the Power Platform in Microsoft 365 using the AI in Azure AI Foundry is game busters. And I'm telling you, like, you can absolutely crush it and make a huge difference within the organization, adding tremendous value in short order, leveraging the skill set that you already have. So let's break this down. What is SOAJA? So for most of you who have seen my posts on LinkedIn and TikTok and YouTube Shorts and all this other good stuff, we know that this is an acronym that breaks down 5 skill sets as a Power Platform developer you need to master and unearth and leverage here. And we're going to point out how all 5 of these are being used on this contracting agent. The first one is solution. So what do we mean by solution? These solutions, my friend, are the Power Automate solutions that we learn to love and hate and love to and leverage and scale with within the Power Automate. Now, these here, as you can see here, this is my AI contracting. Let me go out one more. I have a ton of solutions right here in the default environment. So let me go ahead and filter on contract. Okay, great. So these are the 3 contract solutions I have. This one here, this first one, this is the one we're playing around with. Now, this is actually a sneak peek for you that's coming up in future videos, probably in the next couple of weeks. Basically, we took this whole contracting process. We put an email inbox monitor on top of it. So now our vendors, our suppliers, our subcontractors, they email contracts over to this for review. It takes it in, it sends the right notifications, it sends it to the AI, OCR it, read it, extract all the metadata, and then send the right routing for the human in the loop segment and send it out. This AI contract processor is what we're working on here. Basically, this is the one that has a scheduled job. It will read this library that I showed you here. Let me just put this in a simple view. It will read this library, systematically produce an OCR, update it. The next round of batch processing would take that raw text, extract it out, fire off your different agents as needed, and you can fire these off in parallel, saving you a ton of time. And you know how to do a parallel branch in Power Automate, and then have your one update action waiting for each one of those to complete, and then update their respective section to the SharePoint list. Again, someone who's just an agent developer, an AI agent developer that doesn't have the skill set of grabbing data, saving it into a data repository, that's something that they have to come up to speed with. That's our 80% that we're already skilled on. We know how to create batch processes using infrastructure as a service, using Power Automate, get this thing running. We'll fine tune it as to best that we can do within reason, and have this thing execute on the nightly job. And we can get fancy. We can, every time it runs, we can only look at deltas, right? You know how to set this stuff up, right? So over here on the workflow status, maybe the one that you touch, you go ahead and set a process. We've done this with very large SharePoint lists. Basically, what you do is chunk those up, create like a batch. It probably takes 6 minutes to get all 600,000 in memory. But once you have all 600,000 in memory, you break them up into batches, and then you process those batches in parallel using the apply each. So we know all these tips and tricks on how to pull this off. That's why you become fantastic and highly valuable. So here, not only do we have these solutions, when you go into these solutions, we're leveraging solutions because of this fact here. Notice my naming convention. Agent. This lets me know, if I'm looking at this, the difference between an agent, one without a prefix that has like process or the name of the solution, and one that has SVC. The SVCs are the ones are reusable functions. They may or may not have an AI component to it. The ones that have agent, do have an AI component to it, meaning that they have a prompt associated with this unit of work, right? And that's what makes them agents. All you see here is just me leveraging a calling flow and a bunch of child flows. And here's the other thing. Let me just pop back out. Once you structure these and you start doing out of the box thinking or being creative for how you structure this, you come up with a solution like this, your AI agent core. What does this mean? This AI agent core are reusable AI components that you can use service in any agent that you build, right? In the Power Agent platform, any agent. Because in this anatomy, if you look at the anatomy in abstract, basically these are really the four basic elements that you have. You have ability to call so this first one and this last one are very similar. The first one just bundles a lot. All you do is pass it the prompt key. It will automatically find a prompt catalog stored in SharePoint list, grab that description, build up your message array, right? Because you're a SOAJA, it'll build up your message array, send that message array to the LLM. Once you got a response for the LLM, return back with plain text. So this one is very simple. Give it a prop key as input text, and then you would get the AI response as output text, right? And that output text could be plain text, markdown, HTML, JSON, ... And you define what's in that string in your prompt, allowing this to be almost like a proxy. Like it don't care what your business logic is. All it knows it needs to do is take that input stream, get the prompt catalog description, build that message array, call the LLM, take that response and return it back to you. That's something that we do 99% of the time. So it makes sense to make this a reusable component. These two here are your history. Most of your users, when you start to get into this, when you get to building agent number 12 and agent 20 and agent 35, when you start building these out, your user's going to be like, it needs memory. Every time I ask a question, I don't want to start from the beginning. Like you're this and like it needs memory. I need to be able to pick up like a chat history, pick up where I left off and just ask it relevant questions based on previous context. This is going to allow you to do that, right? And this is going to scale with the new pattern that we have in Azure AI Foundry with the responses API. And this is very interesting, right? Because if you pay attention to your token window, when you make AI calls, you're going to have how many tokens did you use in the prompt and how many tokens did you use in the output. From our experience so far, it's almost a 90-10 split. 90% of the token overall utilization is in the prompt. So if you can save that on the server side, on the Azure AI Foundry side, and then just reference that with a prompt key, or they call it the response key that you get, now you're saving tokens on your subsequent calls. Because most of the time, the front load, the first call, is a very large prompt. Because that's how we have to fine tune. We got to get this thing down to where we need it to be. And we iterate, fine tune it. We got this thing locked in. But every time we need to use it, we have to pass that on, right? So we pay for this token already with other transactions. So why are we keep paying for the same tokens over and over again? And it's the 90% portion of that call, right? So that responses API is going to save you a ton of money. And this is why we love it, right? So we got reusable components with solutions. We got easy grouping of the business layer in solutions. And as these are references. So if I go back to my contract solution, right? So if I go into this contract solution, actually, I can get rid of these two. Let me do them now. So I can get rid of these. When I say get rid of, I can remove them from this solution because they're reusable components. And the only reason why I have them in this solution is because when I'm troubleshooting and one of these reusable flows throw an error, it's just easier for me to come back to the solution, click on it, see what I need. Oh, I forgot to pass this parameter. Oh, it's expecting this type. Oh, whatever the case may be. Again, I shouldn't be, unless this reusable component is still in this early stages of maturity, I shouldn't be redefining the inner guts of this reusable flow, right? If I'm getting the error, it's because I'm passing it a parameter that it is not expecting, and I'm breaking it there. So this just allows me to come in here and fine tune that. So out of all of this, these are my core business flows. And I really only have two. Actually, I think I removed too many. I think I removed 10. But anyway, it's a lot smaller. I'll say all that to say it's a lot smaller list than what we initially saw. So really, these are my core. I think I'm missing one. So out of this whole contracted process to iterate, I'm missing the one where you kick off the job. This is a job that runs probably every night or in the weekend, however, whatever the business say that need this refreshed. So I have a job that runs against that contract. It's going to look at the ones who are not yet been processed. Because if I have 600,000, when I run that job, I want it to be as efficient as possible, right? So I'm only want to look at the ones that are deltas. They're new since the last time I ran it. They've been modified since the last time I ran it. And if I touch it already, I don't want to look at it again. I want to make my job super efficient. So that's missing. This one here, this is the one once it's called, right? Once it's called, it's going to get the contracts, the plain text, and it's going to generate the summary. And then it's going to update the prop. Then it's going to get the embeddings needed for your vector database. And then it's going to do the JSON. Again, this is you being a SOAJA and knowing how to create a JSON object and append it to a JSON array, right? And then this is the query that's needed that will go ahead and execute that Cosmo DB. Again, this is reusing this one call is doing probably 7 steps. The good news is these 7 steps we've already have processed before. These 7 steps we already engineered in a reusable flow. So this is from a calling flow, this is as simple as it gets. This makes an AI call. It goes and this is the content where it needs to process. This is the key that it grabs from our prompt catalog. So this is our prompt catalog here. So it grabs the key for metadata. And if you look in here, this is your instruction set on how it manages that metadata. Remember, I was telling you that in that instruction set, we want a finite list of types when we are doing that. And then this is how it extracts out the contract date, so on and so forth. And it knows how to return all that. So this one little call here is grabbing your prompt, generating your message array, calling your AI, hosted in Azure AI, processing that response because that's a JSON call. It's a API call, right? SOAJA API call. When you get the return, process the JSON, find where your value is, and return your value in plain text. And this one here, all I'm doing is taking that plain text value. I don't know why this is not showing up in modern view. Taking this plain text value here, convert it to a JSON object, and then return it back to the user. Right? This is all we're doing here. And again, if you have a really strong foundational reusable component layer, now when it comes to tackle different business processes, it's really just a matter of how do I leverage what I've already have built? What business logic do I need to account for? What's different about this application than everything else that I built? What's my naming convention? Create your solution, and you're off to the races. That's the solution, and that's the S. The O, we talked about this several times. Out of the box thinking. This is where you have to be creative and innovative on building these solutions. You already are building this muscle, right? We all have, I struggle with this. Like we're all are, and that's why it's really good to have a strong team, or really be good to have a good community group that you're part of, because with this out of the box thinking, especially if you can spell thinking correctly, this is where you're being challenged on working within the boundaries of a box that you have to build something creative, right? And there's a fine line between hacking your way through it and building an elegant solution within it, right? Very fine. So out of the box thinking, one, coming up with an architecture design to where you have these reusable components, to where every time you're building one of these Power Platform agents, you don't feel like you're building it from scratch. Out of the box thinking, how can you package looking at this whole process from the abstract and package those reusable pieces to where you feel like you're not re-engineering that every time? How do you achieve this requirement? Because again, the business case is we have a leak in contracting. These are our sticky points. We don't know when a contract's going to be reviewed or auto-renew. We got key metadata elements that we look for anytime we review any contract. Yeah, they vary. The depth of those metadata values vary based on contract type, but how do we solve for that? Right now, we're just looking at the name of the file to determine the contract type. This is another scenario. A company acquired another company, and through that acquisition, they were going to take on all the responsibilities of the contracts that company was under, right? The child company. So the parent company was absorbing the child company. The child company had all these contracts over the years, decades, right? Probably half a century. And once they did an audit, it came out to be about 600,000 contracts. Now they need to go through and understand which contracts of the 600,000 were active, what type of contract it was, what state was it contracted in, it had to be regulated in, what are some of the payment terms, what are the renewable terms, what is the termination terms, ... right? So being able to know, okay, I have this skill, Power Platform, I have this access to AI agents, right? We're building that up, making that stronger. When you combine the two and leverage everything at your disposal, everything that's in Microsoft 365, which is vast, all the services and things that you can spin up in Azure, not Azure AI, that's just one small component of the whole Azure services lake, right? Just being familiar with all of that. And then the stuff that you have in the Power Platform that allow you to execute on this with low code, no code, with that's a special skill set. Why pro developers are looking at, okay, I need to host this in the Azure function, and I wanted to make sure I'm serverless because I don't want to be in the business of managing operating systems. Okay, now that I got that, now I need to figure out my security within Entra ID. Oh, I need this component, so now I need to register as an app. Oh, I got these keys. Okay, now I need to store these in the key vault. And okay, now I need to create these different environments, my dev, my QA, and my prod. Like before they even start, when they get out of the technical design phase, we're almost done with our iteration 1 and talking about iteration 2. It's an unfair advantage. So use that to your advantage, right? API calls and consumption. This is a skill set you have to have. And this is just me. And I don't expect everyone to be like me. Actually, You should aspire to be like me. You should. But for those who don't want to be, I'm just kidding. You have to consume API calls, and you have to be able to make API calls. And I say that I'm different in this way than probably most, especially I go against the grain with a lot of the training that's out there, is because I'm not creating custom connectors for this. I'm not. I feel like custom connectors are so much overhead. They create a lot of maintenance. And now that I have a reusable flow, because that's the benefit of a custom connector. And that's the other thing. Like a lot of this stuff, even like Copilot, I'm taking a step back and I'm looking at it from the abstract and say, okay, what exactly are we trying to achieve here? What's the goal? Like, I'm not following a prescription. I'm not following a step-by-step tactical blueprint. I'm really looking at things from the abstract, and I'm saying, okay, is there a better, and always challenging, is there a better way to do this? And a lot of those drivers is that sometimes you're being led down the path of, okay, you can do this, and all of this is done for you, but surprise, it's a premium license. Surprise is more than just your standard. Surprise, you have to buy this additional license in order to make that happen. How do you achieve this? Keep your licensing costs to a minimum, keep your usage costs to a minimum. You're going to pay for something, but are we putting those dollars in the right spot? Are we doing value engineering to save the bottom line? Are we doing value engineering to build this foundation that, the first solution that comes out the gate is going to take the hit because the foundation piece needs to be built. But once that's built, taking advantage of that, we're building on the other ones and cranking these out in fraction of a time. That's how you move the needle at the macro from moving the organization to what is AI, how can we leverage AI, to, okay, let's go ahead and we got full adoption AI that's not license dependent, Copilot, right? So instead of licensing 100 people out of the 9,000 in the workforce to use Copilot, now we're able to get all 9,000 to use one of these power agents, right? In its generic sense, AI stored in Azure AI Foundry. I got all 9,000 day one using this, exposed using AI. My macro usage and AI adoption at the org is going to be light years stronger than a Copilot strategy. That's a topic for a different day. If you see my posts, you see how passionate I'm about that. But I'm saying we're being led down a path that will cost us more licenses. And I get it. Right? If you don't know better, if you don't know better or know how to build, you got to pay for the build, right? If you don't know how to build, you have to pay for the build. And that's what Copilot is. Pay, like someone built it. Hey, I got you a front-end AI agent. It's calling a private AI. It has AI safety and all this other good stuff built in. We're going to keep iterating and adding features. But by the way, this is not one of those licenses you can try today and cancel and get a 1-month subscription. No, this is going to be a license. It's going to be $30 per user per month with a 12-month commitment per seat. How many seats do you need? And your CFO had to be like, okay, we got 1,000 people, $30 per month for a 12-year commitment. That's $30,000 a month for 12 months. Okay, who got $360,000 that we did not account for? That's why the ROI question is that much stronger today. We don't have time to play those games. We need this technology and put it to work now, ASAP, and you're the one to do it. Okay, JSON. This is the core. JSON's not going anywhere, right? JSON's the new XML for those of us who are still living under the rock, right? So with JSON, this is the messaging, this is the format, this is the strategy on how to get a remote service, a remote system to give you information back to your system, and you pass it and you ask it for information from the other system, and you do that using an API. As far as AI, this is where your message array comes into play. Let's see if we can pull one of these up quickly. Okay, so this whole model is something that you would do all the time, especially when you're calling an LLM that's hosting Azure AI Foundry for OpenAI, right? So I made this a reusable service. Me and the team made this a reusable service. This is our message array. This is the one, for those who are not familiar, but basically it looks like this. The first thing is we call it the message array because it's in the request process. Request process is the payload of the request process. And the property name is message. And the value of that is an array. In this array, and I'm going to abbreviate a lot because I don't know the exact syntax by heart, but basically you have really 2 objects to initialize this, and eventually you can end up with a whole series of objects if you have chat history. So basically, you're going to have your role, and that would be, you started off with system, and then you would have the content, and this would be whatever your prompt is, right? So you are a legal team expert. My syntax is off. This is separated by a comma, right? So you have the role. Every object, you're going to have this. You're going to have the role. It's going to be system, user, or assistant. And then the content is whatever that role is adding to that AI. So this system tells it what position or what you need to do. So you can educate it. And then the user, this is where you would pass, in our scenario, the actual contract, the plain text. So let's just grab, copy a bit here. So I'm going to copy just a piece of this just so that you can get a sense of what this looks like. Hold on. So let me just copy this piece here, and then I'm going to do quotes, ellipsis, or whatever. Right? And here's the other thing. You will notice some of these can have double quotes, right? So when you pass this out, you stringify, you do all this other stuff. It needs to escape those extra characters so that way you don't accidentally end this too early, right? So now, let me shorten this. I want to keep all this on one line. Okay. So now you have that, and you will send this in, right, to the LLM. And when the LLM respond back, it's going to have the assistant with the data. Now, if you're doing a history, your history will look something like this. So your assistant responds back with this information, and now you have a history. This is the last. So this is your second message, and then you just keep going. And so say, for example, if the user is going back and forth with this AI legal agent, they will have the initial system prompt, their initial question, and then the response of the assistant, and then a follow-up question or clarity, and it will just keep going from there. Assistant user. System, you only want to send once, right? Or else you start to mess this up. If you pull these out of order, your AI is going to get confused, because every time you send this to the AI, it's almost like you're asking the question for the very first time, but you're giving it examples, or you're giving it a history of what if already said, and it gets into alignment with that and stays within that tone. Here's another thing when you hear about fine-tuning, right? Fine-tuning is very similar to this, where you give it examples of even your first question. You're a legal assistant. I need you to do X, Y, Z. The user record would say, I need something, 1, 2, 3. And then you would give an example of how the assistant should have responded. And then you may give another example, user, and then another example of how the assistant should have responded. And another example, user, and then another example of how the assistant should respond in that scenario. And ideally, that user assistant and the sample are different use cases or scenarios that you want it to conform to. And now any question after that, because it has its examples, it will quickly identify and draw to certain conclusions based on the patterns that you have, right? So understanding this with fine-tuning, understanding this out the gate, and understanding this for history and chat history is going to be critical. The good news is, if you're thinking outside of the box and you're looking at this in the abstract, you can build an engine on how you put this in place once, invest that engineering to get it right once, and you and the rest of your dev team can leverage these reusable components. And the reusable component is leveraging solutions, and the solutions are baked in with Power Automate, which is the skill set that you're leveraging that's getting you out the gate ASAP. Okay, so that's going to be JSON. And the last one, actually we killed two birds with one stone, is the AI message array, right? It's just that, is the JSON of making that call, consuming that call, and most of the time that JSON call is going to be here. But again, if you have these architected right, I should not see, when you are creating other agents within your solution, I should only see one instance of this call to the AI, a very uniform way on how you're managing JSON, one instance of the JSON on how to consume this AI. Let's take a closer look, right? So here, the message array is coming in. We have the mode set up. This is the URI to the endpoint where I'm calling this in Azure AI, right? This is my key. I'm not going to show you that. These are my temperatures and top Ps that we play with. And basically, we have the caller, when they're calling this reusable function, they check the flag, yes or no. I want this creative. If it's unchecked, we're going to default to systematic. So if it's creative, we need a certain temperature and a certain top P value. If it's systematic, we need a different set of temperature and a different set of top P value, and those will be in lockstep to get the results that we need. Max tokens, this is something you may or may not play with. Again, if you're budget conscious, if you're trying to optimize for contracts, we probably leave that open-ended. For executive summary, we put a cap on that particular agent for the executive summary of the contract, tell it to probably max out at 2,000 tokens. And 2,000 tokens is what's the max we want to use on the response. The response object, this goes into, let me just jump down here, of what that HTTP request look like. Again, I'm not creating custom components within our custom actions within Power Automate. If I'm interacting with a third-party tool, if I'm interacting with another system within the organization, you expose the API, I'm very comfortable and intimate with this HTTP request, right? And you say, Sean, how will other people know to use it? It's a reusable function, right? It's a reusable function. And in there, you just call that reusable function, pass the parameters, and I'm going to do more than just make an HTTP call. I'm going to clean up this response on the JSON, because look at this response. When you get the response back from this HTML, look at all these replaces that we're doing. There's certain things we don't want to respond back with that are nuances that you have to clean up, right? There's how to get to the actual message and the body of the response. Like all of that is done for you, because what we do not want is for this message content that actually holds like everything that you see here, like this, the first index in that array, and then the property of content, which is a child property of message. You're going to have to navigate your way down to that each and every time you call this API for the LLM. And this is OpenAI. I don't want you to do that as a user of this service. I want to simplify it. Give me the parameters I need. I'm going to respond back with the string that you expect. And the format of the string that you expect is going to be defined in the prompt that you passed in, right? I'm putting all that onus on the caller where they can focus on the business and not the syntax of the response. And that's where you key. So to wrap it up, be a SOAJA, right? Power Automate Solutions. That's the foundation needed to allow you to build reusable components, reusable flows, access to child flows, and Power Automate. Extremely powerful tool. Out of the box thinking. This goes to say with anything Power Platform. This goes to say with anything with development. You have to be intimate with your tools. Understand Power Automate, what it can and cannot do. Understand the difference between Power Automate batch jobs, trigger jobs, manual jobs, desktop flows. You have to understand the difference between all of that, even on the Power App side, right? The pros and cons, when to use one versus the other. API calls. You're going to interact, the world we're getting into, you're going to be interacting with more API calls than ever before. And it's going to be more than just integration. Like this is just to be able to use AI within your solution. It's an API, right? And then here's the other thing. You're going to be able to create your own APIs. Because with the HTTP request trigger on the Power Automate, that's just an API. You get an API endpoint, deal with a post request, you define what the body of that post request needs to be. It's going to trigger your Power Automate. You scrape through that post request. Everything else is downstream remains the same. So in Power Platform, you're creating APIs, you're consuming APIs, you're calling APIs. You have to be really comfortable with these API. Some of these have token bearers. Some of these have API keys. You have to understand the difference with the other headers. The application, the content, the context, the acceptable context, the different verbs, a get, a post, a push, a merge. Like all of these, you got to understand the difference with when to do one versus the other, right? And then when you're given the API and they're telling you how to call it, how to transform that into, and some of that is not always obvious, right? When you get these third-party vendors, they give you the sample code. Okay, here's the API. This is how you call it XYZ. And they give you samples. So they probably show you a sample in Node.js. They may show you a sample in .NET. They may show a sample in JavaScript. The sample I usually look for, and Microsoft is really good with this, is the CURL sample. Because usually once I see that, I can easily transform or translate how to make that a curl call and pick out the pieces needed to make an HTTP call within Power Automate. The JSON. JSON is key. JSON is, we didn't get into a lot of it here, but this is one of the skills you absolutely have to be very comfortable with. Structured JSON, a JSON object, a JSON array of objects. Understand that you're just going to have nested. You can have an object property that's another object. You can have an object property that's an array that has another array of objects, and you just continue that cycle. These can be nested. How to navigate through that to get to the bottom that you need. Here's another one, especially when you're dealing with SharePoint Search API. How to go from a dictionary structure, right? That's when they do their generic key value pair, right? So you'll get an array, and instead of array of objects, it's just key value pairs. How do you, and whether it is the key is the property name, the value is the property value, right? So how do you transpose a dictionary or hash table format into a JSON format? That's really powerful stuff. If you figure out, you can make some extreme magic happen, right? And here's another one. Not to be so dependent on the tokens within Power Automate. What do I mean by that? So usually when you get into very complex loops and things like that, a prime example, you have a SharePoint list. And in that SharePoint list, you have a people column. And in that people column, the option is checked to allow multiple selects, right? How do you navigate through that JSON that gets created to where you're not creating a hot mess? Now, Power Automate is good when it's great, but there's been times where Power Automate be slipping. So the token that you expect may not be in that drop-down token. So how do you go get it? If it's not given to you, how do you go get it? And the ability to read JSON objects or the results of an action, comb through that, understand the structure of it, understand the difference between a body token within the action result and a body value token within the action result. And they switch depending on what technology you're using with that action, right? Just being familiar with that and just not be dependent on, oh, I can't do that because that token is not exposed. No, go get it. Be comfortable with that JSON to go and get it. And AI message array. In AI, this is going to be the heart and soul of getting anything out of it. Learn how to make simple calls. Learn how to make fine-tune calls or calls with samples. I may not be using fine-tune in the right way, but learn how to make sample calls. Sample calls mean, I need you to do this, and here's an example of what I'm looking for. Here's the system. I asked this, you should have said this. I asked this, you should say this. I asked this, you should say this. Okay, now I'm going to ask you this. And that last one is the user. So you send all of that with it. The history is key. History is going to make your app look so much smarter for your business users. Because where they look at it, they're going to be like, okay, let me ask a question, I get a result, great. And then they're going to do a follow-up. The expectation, because they've been using Grok, they've been using ChatGPT, they've been using Meta and Llama and Gemini and all these other ones. So they know how this should flow. And when you're building something against business applications, business structure, business systems, and it's in alignment to what they expect when interacting with a chat bot, you're winning. You're winning. You become one of the most sought after engineers in the organization and really in the country. Very few people have a really good handle on this that's really adding value. It doesn't surprise me that 90% of the AI POCs are failing because there's so many new tech you got to wrap your hand around. What if you came to the game with 80% of the tech already mastered? The only 20% you need is the AI component that's missing, right? Versus learning everything brand new from soup to nuts, trying to do a simple hello world, and you're failing on the POC on that. That doesn't make sense, right? Again, this is why it makes sense to, in some scenarios, hit the brakes on this. Take a step back. Look at it from the abstract. Don't get caught up with agents and MCP and A to A. Not saying that stuff is not relevant, but do you really need all that infrastructure now? Do you trust AI enough to call it autonomously? Meaning that you call it AI and based on the result, it decide what other AIs to call in the network? No, like how do you troubleshoot that? Where's your application lifecycle? Where's your dev, your UAT, and your production for that? You already have that here, right? So master the 20%, be a SOAJA, and make things happen. I'll see you in the next video.